he talked about the loss of strength.
Yes.
That the people lost their strength. And then they lost their vision. They looked around and all they could see was the rubble.
Yeah.
They couldn't see that the wall was half finished. They just saw the rubble.
Yeah.
That's a loss of vision. They lost their courage, right? Because they knew the enemy was going to come in and take them. And ultimately, they lost their confidence because they said, we're not able to do this.
Yeah.
We're not able to finish it.
I think Nehemiah says it in his response in chapter 6 when he was called to go to Ono. The call looked good. It was like a call to diplomacy. When he says, I'm doing a great work and I can't come down. No, I think that that's what we have to do is we've got to stay on task. We've got to live in the spirit where God has us, continue to live in a life of prayer as we see Nehemiah did that. And he trusted in the Lord that he never abandoned the work that was present in the moment.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we deep dive into Sunday's message and explore your questions. I'm your host, Astin Kahnk, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So, grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. Well, welcome back to Let's Talk About That, episode 117. And I am here today with Mr. Robert Bradow and Eddie. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Doing good. It's Monday.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Good deal.
Yeah, as Robert said, it is Monday morning. We have to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
So,
but we're here.
Yeah.
We're here. We're doing it. I appreciate you guys joining me this morning. Yeah, so Bold was a few weeks ago. Both of you guys went. Have you recovered from Bold?
I'll speak for me to begin with. My job was pretty easy because I was just kind of over security. And our guys did such a great job. Man, it was good. As far as recovering, though, no, I'm good. No, now, Brother Eddie, he was there for the duration. So,
Eddie, you recovered yet?
Oh, yeah, no problem. But then again, now, in fairness, I did not stay Friday night. I did not sleep over Friday night.
Okay, gotcha.
I did stay for everything on Friday night and then left. Got home late Friday night. But actually, we thought we might have some shortage of beds. We weren't sure if we had enough beds.
Okay.
And so, I took one for the team. And
I am gladly okay sleeping in my own bed.
Yeah, I took one for the team and went home to sleep in my own bed.
There you go.
But then I got back 8 o'clock Saturday morning. So, yeah, I was there for most of it.
You took a quick nap on Friday night to get back Saturday morning.
Nap on, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was good.
A good deal. Well, what stood out to you guys most from that weekend now that you've had a week to kind of think through what you saw, hear from students, hear from parents? Is there anything specific that, stood out to you guys?
I think the biggest thing that I was able to witness, and you see this when kids go to camp or something like this, is that the freedom that they have to worship. And then, so they were in there, they're worshiping. Lucas is leading powerfully, as he always does a great job. And these kids are raising their hands, and then Chip comes in and just puts the hammer down and said, "Okay, are you guys are you putting on a show? Are you performing, or is this for real?"
Yeah.
And it was just a powerful night. And then on Sunday morning to see the residual of that, the whole front row of Brantford location just filled with kids with bold shirts. Oh man, it was good. It was so good.
That's so awesome. What about you, Ed? Anything specific stand out to you?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's like, what do I leave out? I think, well, one thing just for fun, Chip and I did the podcast with the students.
Yeah.
With a group.
Which was awesome, by the way. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah, it really did well, good. The girls, they're always a little bit shy to start with, and then they get into it.
Oh, yeah, you can hear like, hey, it's me. Yeah. Hey, it's me. I was like, I love this.
Yeah. Well, last year we did a kind of a mix of guys and girls, and mostly I think from the Live Oak location. So this time Chip decided to do a small group of senior high girls from the Brantford location.
Okay.
And so, that was really just from a fun aspect. I really enjoyed that. And I guess it's a little bit of a standout because of what you hear the students say and what you hear them taking away from this and taking away from the message that they had heard on Friday night.
Yeah.
Because at that time they hadn't really heard all the messages. So that was big. I think the other thing too, maybe the most big moment for me was Saturday morning. And Saturday morning's teaching time, we did have a worship experience, but the worship team wasn't there. The worship team was there Friday night, And then they all got to go home and rest up a little bit for Saturday night because they came back for Saturday night.
Okay.
And as Robert already said, they were incredible. I mean, they were just so good. I mean, they really are good.
Yeah.
And that's not just a prejudiced pastor speaking. I mean, they are good. So that was it. But Saturday morning, I was all ready for us to not have any music. But then we had a team go up. And it was all students. The whole team was
really?
students.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the whole team. They had Jackson Jones was leading with the guitar, and then he was accompanied by Ryland Roush and by Lauren Martin.
Okay.
And they were so good. Now, Lucas did play the, what's that drum, the little drum they just tapped? Robert?
Oh, the cajon.
Cajon, thank you. Yeah, the cajon. He played the cajon with them, which was great. But they led the worship.
That's so cool.
And the moment to me that was spectacular was seeing students lead students. Right. And, from my perspective I've said during the series several times that I really feel like the burden for the orchard, the vision started with the burden, and the burden was for the next generation.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, it hit me, particularly at the end of the last song, Who Else Is Worthy? We all love
We were
that
just
one.
talking about, so good.
Ryland did something I was so grateful for, because when they got to the end of the song and it came down, the guitar stopped, the cajon stopped, the backup stopped, and then Ryland pulled the microphone away from, from a distance.
Yeah.
So that, and our worship leaders will do that occasionally. I really like that because then you can hear the church sing. You can hear, in this case, the students sing. And as the students were singing and our students were leading, I thought to myself, that's the next generation, and they're ready.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're ready.
Yeah.
They don't need us anymore. They don't need my generation.
Wow. Yeah.
They don't need the generation behind me.
Yeah.
They are ready. This is Gen Z.
I love it.
And they're ready to worship. So that was an incredible moment. But I will give one shout out to, this year we did something a little that we haven't done the past couple of years. This year we used our guys, our pastors, teachers, to be the speakers.
Okay.
And man, they knocked it out of the park. Every one of them. Chip led off with a powerful, powerful message on performative Christianity.
Which was such a good discussion last week on the podcast.
It
oh, my
was.
goodness.
So that was good. And then Austin followed up. He's our student pastor and worship leader here in Lake City. And Austin did what I expected. He did an incredible job. I mean, I remembered Austin being a good teacher.
Yeah.
And he did. And actually played off of Chip's Friday night experience by talking about performative service and how sometimes we serve Jesus to perform. And then Matt did a great job closing out on Saturday night. Saturday night's always hard because, once those students get over the excitement of jumping up and down during the music and they sit in those chairs, it's been a long day. They hadn't had any sleep.
Yeah, they're tired.
But Matt did a great job.
Yeah.
So I was proud of all our guys for doing that.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, I was watching everything on social media of just what was going on. And I may have had a little bit of FOMO, so I'm excited to be there next year when Lucy's just a little bit older. But man, it was, from what I could tell in the podcast, it was one of those weeks or weekends that will mark those students forever, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's just dive right in to our last week of our sermon series. Called to This was yesterday. And so what has, week 4, we went through Nehemiah 1, 2, 3, and 4. What has stood out to you most from this sermon series, from, being the teachers of this sermon series?
I'll begin. To me, this is kind of in my wheelhouse because you're talking about, 4 chapters and a book that's about a leader who is building. He's leading people to build. And that's something throughout my ministry that God has used me to do, is grasping a vision, birth through a burden, and then going through that building process. And watching this, I can look back and I can see a lot of the ways that God used this process in my life, but I also found a lot of ways that I failed when there were mishaps. And I was like, if I would have read this book earlier, things would have been a lot smoother. But it was really good for me. And I really enjoyed this. And it really, yesterday, hit home with me of how there's a great application for the community and the church. We're talking about call to this, what is your calling?
Yeah.
We so focus on in the church, but yesterday it hit hard because there's so much calling. Maybe it begins at home, in leaderships of families and things like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. But you, Eddie?
That's hard to say. I think, when you use words like most and best, it gets hard.
It's hard,
But I think if I'm thinking most, not that this was a surprise to me, but it was a standout moment. I think having so many people respond after all 4 messages, really, that this is timely. This is timely in their lives. And seeing so many people trying to figure out this.
Yeah.
And so many people having even an aha moment. Oh, well, I think I know what my this is.
Yeah.
Meaning, and I guess I should clarify for somebody who hadn't heard previously, but when we talk about this is what are you called for? What are you called to?
Yeah.
Nehemiah was called to go build a wall. But what are you called to? What's your this? And so I think maybe certainly one of the bigger standouts for me was so many people discovering or seeking their this.
Yeah. I would say that too. And I also even heard from, some moms and dads of just reminding them that, wow, my greatest calling is in my home first. And I think that was a good, I wouldn't say wake up call, but a good reminder to parents of some, in this season, my this are the kids that are in my household right now. And I loved how you guys said sometimes your this is the people you influence or the people that you raise. And to me, that personally stood out to me. Just a good reminder of like, wow, that's what my, this is in this season. So was there anything that you felt that maybe God has challenged you guys to in this sermon series? Yeah,
I'll start with all humility. I'll say this. I'm a builder. I'm a guy that, lead, follow, get out of the way.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, where it says that he prayed, he fasted, he prayed for many days. And then we know later that was 4 months. Mm-hmm. Slow down.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a history of just going, tearing down walls. And, and sometimes I have to go back and pick up the pieces and say, okay, God, I tore something down I wasn't supposed to. Please forgive me.
Yeah.
But I think I really feel like God appreciates that passion. But, it's that meekness, it's passion under control, power under control.
Yeah.
And so that was my challenge, is to slow down and enjoy that moment, because I wish that there was a segment in this book of the prayers of Nehemiah.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
In that moment, from this burden on his heart. Because, it wasn't like he could turn on Fox News every day and see what was going on in Jerusalem or get on Instagram. But in that moment, he had this, he got word.
Yeah.
What takes place that, most people today, they get a burden and they forget about it. Mm-hmm. But it was so hard that he fasted, he mourned, and he prayed. And then we see later on, 4 months later, that now all of a sudden his face is still so broken. Man, the Spirit was working on this man.
Yeah.
To a point that the king, realized that.
Yeah.
So that's where that was my challenge, is be patient, slow down, and embrace the burden.
Yeah.
And let that fuel your prayers, let that fuel your passion, because when God gets ready to move, he's going to do something big, and then we see the result of that.
Yeah, that's so true, because I think so many times, just our human flesh, we see a problem, we want to fix it, but it's like actually taking a second to step back and be like, all right, God, you have your way, but I'm just going to take it back and pray, and not just be like, oh yeah, we have to fix it. Or I even think for me, to chime in, I think what's also challenged me is, a lot of the times, being in ministry, people will have these great ideas of, hey, I think we should do this. And so many times before, I'd be like, oh yeah, let's do that. But then I'm realizing that that's not necessarily my burden, but I want to equip people and to show them, hey, if that's what God has called you to, or if you have this burden, kind of do what Nehemiah did. Take a second, think about it, pray about it, and let's see what doors God's going to open for you with that.
I feel like, when the burden first came on his heart, when he got word that, the city was in ruins, had he went to the king on that day, the king would have said, shut up and get back to work.
Yeah.
So God was working in other people's lives that was totally out of Nehemiah's control.
Yeah, that's so good.
So I think that's the secret in this. And that was my challenge in that, is, that while God's working in my life and I'm gung-ho, I'm ready to tear down walls. Let's get after this.
Yeah.
There's other implements, there's other parts that God's working in their lives to bring all this together in the fullness of his time to make it work perfectly.
Yeah, that's so good. Do you have anything?
Oh, yeah, sure. In fact, I got 2 areas.
All right, let's go.
I think the first challenge for me was I was the one tasked with putting this series together. Mm-hmm. So we kind of share that among our communicators. And so I was tasked with this one. So to me, the biggest challenge was where do we go with this? There's so doggone much in Nehemiah, right? And you could talk about leadership. Right. I mean, Nehemiah to me is one of my favorite leadership books.
Okay.
You know, you can talk about prayer. He prayed 11 times in the book. You know, you could talk about the vision of the people. There's just so many ways we can go. And I think that's why it stood out to me, or why I was at least deeply satisfied to hear so many people say, oh, this is timely, and this is, you know, I want to find my this, or I found my this. Because for me, part of the challenge was getting to this, right? And so that was a challenge, I think. But personally, the challenge, and personally maybe the high point of the book as far as God, you know, challenging, I'm always challenged to prayer. And prayer always challenges me. And that's, man, you would think that after being a Christian so long and a pastor for so long, you would think that I would just have that down. But the challenge of praying is hard.
Yeah.
Because like Robert had mentioned, I like to just, okay, once I catch the vision, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Let's do it. And the prayer is always a challenge. But I think the personal highlight moment for me spiritually was this week. And it's actually in chapter 6, which I didn't really take a lot of time in chapter 6. I referred to it a couple of times. But one of the things I did refer to was when Nehemiah was on the wall at work and the enemies came and challenged him to, hey, we need to have a meeting at Ono. And, you know, and Nehemiah's response blasted me away because his response was, I can't come down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got too much work going on here.
Yeah.
I can't stop.
Yeah.
I don't have time to stop for this, stop for that. And I think for me in my personal stage of life and season of life, that's a good word, because sometimes I wonder, you know, if I'm honest, that, you know, transparency kicks in here. Sometimes I wonder, well, so am I done? You know, am I finished? I mean, my role has changed. Am I finished? Am I done? And boy, what an encouragement for old Nehemiah gave me. Hey, nope, can't come down.
Nope.
Can't
so got work to do.
Yeah, I got work to do. Yeah.
I love that. So so you kind of hit it. Both of you guys have hit it on that. Nehemiah, you know, is a book that has 13 chapters in it. And you know, when you plan a sermon series, you can't get to all 13. I mean, you could. It would take a long time. But was there anything from the book of Nehemiah or anything in this series that you maybe wanted to share but weren't able to share from as our communicators on Sunday mornings?
Yeah, like Eddie, he said, you know, a few minutes ago that you could have gone on the leadership route in this. I love, and I did, that resonated with me a lot as I was studying, just looking, man, this will be so great for leadership, great for leadership. So I tried to take the leadership portion of this where Nehemiah was leading his people and use that as a way that I would teach the people. So personally for me, you know, it was really good. It was just really good, the leadership. I wish, and maybe we can do that, you know, led to this could be the next one. Not called to this, but led to this.
Yeah, hey,
there you go.
Got a sermon series idea. I like
part
it.
2.
Part 2, yeah. No, I think too, but it's also a great way to challenge people. You know, there is so much left of the story that we didn't get to. So, you know, you have a great foundation set up, but I would challenge our listeners during your private worship time, spend some time reading. And I love what Eddie said yesterday. I'm sure you hinted to it as well, Robert, is take it verse by verse, but read it slowly. Don't just read it to check off a box, because there is so much. If you do read it quickly, you'll miss out on those nuggets that God has placed in there. But I would challenge you to finish the book of Nehemiah, because like you said, there is so many avenues you could go, and the word is alive. It's, you know, it's active. So it's, you know, you can get something different every time you read it. So I would be curious to see what people would get from it if they kind of can finish the book themselves. Yeah,
we focused on the call, you know, what is your this? And when you see the leadership qualities of Nehemiah, to me, I was so tempted each week, and I had to fight it because I wanted to use this to teach our men how to lead your families.
Wow.
You know, that to me, there's such a miss, if you will, in this world where guys just aren't leading, men aren't leading. And I saw so many ways that he was just leading, great illustrations throughout. Yeah. So that's where I would have went.
Yeah, that's so good. Any route you would have wanted to go, Eddie?
Yeah, I mean, I wrestled with 5 or 6.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 7. There's just so much you can do. The other challenge is we had 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You know,
really should have been like a, 2-month one, but.
Yeah. So, I'm like, okay. So I put in, when we do our sermon planning, I put in to go to Nehemiah. That was one of the things I suggested, and I got it. But I only got 4 weeks. And I'm like, wow.
So on that note, so whenever you guys have ideas, do you kind of just put them all together and like think through, like you obviously suggested Nehemiah.
Yeah.
So how does that selection, or I've gone on a little bit of rabbit trail, like happen when you guys plan your sermon?
Well, so we make suggestions. Yes,
Okay.
we all come to the table with suggestions, ideas.
Okay.
Suggestions, maybe not is not the right word. Maybe ideas is a better word.
Okay.
And then we kind of pitch those ideas and why we think those ideas or suggestions would be good for us to consider.
Gotcha.
Maybe slightly how we might approach it, but not completely. And then ultimately, it's left up to Chip. He's our lead pastor.
Okay.
And, as our lead pastor, he really has that responsibility. That responsibility should be in his hands. And so he then comes up with the final word on what we're going to do.
Okay.
But anyway, because of that, 4 weeks, that was a real challenge.
I'm sure.
Right. I mean, and I think the one thing that I would have gone to that I really wanted, I tried my best to get to, is chapter 8. See, chapter 8 is one of my favorite chapters.
Okay.
And some of that's because of the preacher in me, because chapter 8, the people gather together at the square at the water gate. And Nehemiah asked the scribe Ezra to come and bring the book of the law, the Torah.
Okay.
And it's the story of, I shouldn't say it's a story because it's a real event. It's the account of where Ezra stands up to read the word to the people. And the people's response, is incredible because it says they stood when the word of God was preached.
Wow.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
They respect that word. It tells you they honor that word. For a long time when I first read that years ago, I would always have people stand when we read scripture at a public meeting. Yeah. We kind of have gotten away from that, although I still do it some. We kind of have gotten away from that. It's not that I think it's something that we should do and become part of our liturgy. Yeah. I'm just saying the people had respect for the word and they stood. And then it talks about how they exposited that word, exegeted that word. So, honestly, I would have loved to have gone there. Yeah. But that wasn't where we needed to go for the series.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I would love to know kind of on a personal level, we've been talking about, our this, and specifically for you guys, what God has called you to. What kind of opposition have you guys faced while you're chasing after your this? And then kind of like a little side question. Eddie talked about the 7 types of opposition on Sunday. I think, Robert, you mentioned it when we were talking earlier. Which one would you say would be the hardest for you guys? And then, so we'll start with that, and then I'll do my third question, my other follow-up question I have.
Being called to ministry, being called specifically to preach in ministry and to lead in ministry, I knew that was my this, early in doing evangelism for 12 years and then becoming a youth pastor for 2 years. Praise God, it was only 2 years. and then, the last 12 years being in a lead pastor role until, coming to the orchard. Okay. So I think for me, I'm not seminary trained. I entered later in life, as far as being a pastor. And I think not feeling like I measured up to people, that was a big distraction. I think is the best word. That was the opposition. That voice says, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. And the secret was, I've just got to stop depending on me and just depend on God. And there's such a freedom in that. But the opposition was just that inner voice says that you could have done better. Yeah. Nobody got anything out of that. You were just rambling words, Yeah. And so that's the greatest opposition I've ever faced, is being my own worst critic and letting the voices in my head. Sometimes it's funny, the progressions as we go through this, because all it takes is just a little bit of ridicule from one person that says, I didn't get anything out of that today. Yeah. And then maybe Satan wants to point and begin to mock you, which leads to the discouragement, fear and intimidation. Okay, do I even need to be, why am I doing this?
Slippery slope. The second you let one of those in, it's just downhill slide.
It's a progression. And then the distractions come in. Well, I'll just go fishing. I'm like Peter, I'll just go fishing. And then there's that internal conflict. So following this, I think that was my greatest one to this.
Okay.
What was the question again?
You're good. So thinking through about your calling, and then what would you say, what's the hardest, I guess, one of those levels of opposition have you faced?
Yeah. So, I feel like I've had several callings to this. So I think I don't know that I have one this.
Okay.
I have one major this.
Yeah. And then the kind of other ones are
related.
Yeah.
But I think that, several callings maybe would fall under that major calling. Obviously, and I really was hesitant to use my calling into to preach.
Yeah.
And into ministry vocationally. I was hesitant a little bit to use that as illustrations because I don't want people to think the only calling in life is to go into vocational ministry.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. Yep.
And so I wanted to be really careful about that, but I couldn't help but go there because that's all the examples in my life. Yep. That's my experience. And so I tried to just, to form that in a way that they could see. I always tried to say, no, this is my calling, but yours, if you're called to be a plumber, as Chip said in one message, then that's your calling, and that's just as important.
Absolutely.
It's just I'm called to a different one. So, I look back on that, and I reflected some on that yesterday, my initial call, 54 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, 54 years ago that God really put that burden on my heart to preach the gospel. I didn't know what that looked like at the time, but I do know that it was clearly to preach, oddly enough. I think sometimes today, guys, ladies try to specify their calling a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And God just doesn't fill in the He fills in the details later.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just knew that God gave me a supernatural desire to preach. And I say supernatural because I was an introvert.
Okay. Which I find that really hard to believe.
No. It's true. It's true. Beth will
Only
verify.
because I know you so well. I find that very hard to believe.
No, Beth will verify. I was an introvert. I mean, when I gave book reports at school, I'd get sick in the morning before I'd go.
Wow.
I just didn't like public speaking. I didn't like to read.
Okay.
You name it. So there was nothing in me that would want to do this. But God gave me such a deep desire that now it's like, how am I going to live my life without doing this?
Yeah.
And so I suppose that he's going to let me do it until I die. you know? But anyway, so I think that's big. But then the other this is to me, I feel like God gave me a more specific call 20 years ago when he put young people, the next generation, on my heart and gave me a deep burden for the next generation, which still carries over today, which is why I go spend a weekend at Bold.
Yeah.
I'm in a position I don't have to go to Bold.
Yeah.
I don't have to lose that night of sleep and my weekend, but I want to because out of that burden, that drive, that calling. So anyway, I will say of those 7, and actually I had 10 or more because I talked in verse 10. If you may remember, Astin, you were there, but I talked also in verse 10 where he talked about the loss of strength.
Yes.
That the people lost their strength and then they lost their vision. They looked around and all they could see was the rubble.
Yeah.
They couldn't see that the wall was half finished. They just saw the rubble.
Yeah.
That's a loss of vision. They lost their courage, right? Because they knew the enemy was going to come in and take them. And ultimately they lost their confidence because they said, we're not able to do this.
Yeah.
We're not able to finish it. So all of those things, I think loss of strength, loss of vision, loss of courage, loss of conviction, all of those things I think are very real obstacles also. And I think those are somewhat, maybe in my mind, easier to overcome than the 7 that we talked about.
Yeah.
That, we find other places through Nehemiah and in other places in Scripture. And I think it's hard for me to say which one is the hardest. I will say, I did not say anything like this in the message yesterday or messages. But one of our charter members at the Orchard, he's been with us from the start and has been with us on the leadership team, our leadership from the beginning. He was on our management team and was very involved in everything we're doing at the Orchard. It was funny because he came up to me after the service yesterday and he said, I was thinking as you were talking, and he said, I can remember all 7 of those at one time happening at the Orchard.
Wow.
Said, yes, sir, you're right, which is why I prefaced those 7 remarks by saying, I've experienced these. I know it's true. It's not just because Robert, I told him that it was AI generated. I just asked AI, okay, what give me some opposition, anyway, some tactics. But I said I shared them not because it came from ChatGPT. I shared them because I know they're right.
Yeah.
And we have experienced all of them at the office.
Yeah. So in case you were wondering what those 7 are, they're mockery, discouragement, fear and intimidation, distractions, internal conflict, false accusation, and weariness are the 7 that I'm referring to. But Eddie, as you were talking, I had this thought come across my mind, and aren't you so glad that when God calls you to something, he doesn't show you the whole picture? Because if you saw...
You couldn't take it.
You couldn't. No, because I was thinking like, obviously, yes, you see, you could see the end goal, but it's like you would also see the times where you were mocked, the discouragement you face, the distractions. And I think that itself would be like the rubble that they would see. You'd be overwhelmed and be like, peace out, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to do it. But the fact that we can walk in that faith, and we've talked about this briefly on the podcast, when, the weight of when you put your yes on that table to walk in accordance to what God has willed for your life, you're walking knowing that you're going to face those oppositions, but by the grace of God, you don't have to face them alone.
Astin, and the next one after the distractions is the internal conflict. And I think that's one of the greatest struggles in church. We were talking about what is your this on an individual basis to people, because we really want to see people get on that onboarding ramp to discovering their this to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
But what's difficult is when you talk about not your this, but our this as a church.
Because we all have a big this. We all have
that's the big picture. It took all of them to build this wall.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, once again, the personal application, not just for me, but for my family. And I go back to my calling, understanding the calling of this. And I will never forget, the first time that I was going to preach. And when I got home, I was like bummed out, like I bombed that. And Danelle looked at me and she said it was okay because I know I didn't marry a pastor.
Yeah.
And there was this, I'm like, does she not have confidence in me?
Yeah.
And it just drove me that much more to be better, to try to be better. But I could not make up Danelle's mind. I just had to trust God to do that.
Yeah.
And she, on that podcast you guys are doing, which will air later, with pastors' wives, she probably shared about that, is that she didn't feel she was called to be a pastor's wife. And she'll tell you today that was something that God began to grow in her and finding her specific place in that. But internal conflict is real, and that's what destroys a lot of marriages when they don't understand the community, their family, what the family is called to, what a marriage is called to, and in a church, what a church is called to. And Brother Ed, that's why I'm so thankful that what we do, I hit on this yesterday, is that we are about families.
Yeah.
And not just the kids and not just the young people, but seeing that family unit thrive, in this world today. And I think we do great content to help them do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's our this.
Yeah. I think, Astin, I tried to dodge this question, but I really think maybe the hardest one for me to deal with is probably false accusations. I think that's probably the hardest. Mockery is tough. And by the way, I don't even think I brought this out yesterday in just the excitement of the moment, but, Jesus was tempted in all of these ways also.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things could have come against him had he allowed them, right? The false accusations on the cross. If you're the Son of God, come down off, save yourself, the distractions that he met. Even the intimidation, although he couldn't be intimidated as God, he could be his man.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, I think that the false accusations are tough because that attacks character.
Yeah.
And then that can go down into family
Absolutely.
life, right? And, you can attack me and I'm pretty easygoing and I'm going to move on and love you anyway. But you attack my wife or my children or now my grandchildren, that's another story altogether. So I think that, I think they're all tough. But I think we have seen all of those things.
And, Astin, all through the opposition that we see in chapter 4, it was all rooted down to just words.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah.
It was just words.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no arrows shot, no swords drawn or spears thrown. At that point, it was just words. And man, how applicable is that today? Specifically, Brother Eddie, not just with mockery and ridicule, but with the false accusations. Even when you say false, sometimes people believe stuff. And in the world that we live today, all it takes is just one Facebook post.
Yep.
And that's what hurts. I know that's what you're talking about, is something that maybe there's just a little snippet of something that can make you begin to believe that something is true. Like in this, Nehemiah, you're going to be the king just because you're a great leader. So they took that little bit and tried to draw this great picture to accuse him. And I agree, Brother Eddie, that is a tough one. So
So what advice would you give to someone maybe that is walking in their this and feeling or struggling with any one of these types of opposition? What advice would you give them, or words you would give them to just...
Man, I think Nehemiah says that, in his response in chapter 6, when he was called to go to Ono, and the call looked good. It was like a call to diplomacy, a call, hey, let's see what we can work out. There was this whole feather on top of this whole mess of maybe there's something good that can come out of this when he says, I'm doing a great work.
Yeah.
And I can't come down. And that word down is twice in chapter 6, he says, come down to Ono. And then he says, I can't come down. So we think about where we're at, in those false accusations that would come right after that when they said, oh, you just want to become a king. That's what it is. No, I think that's what we have to do is we've got to stay on task. We've got to live in the spirit where God has us, continue to live in a life of prayer as we see Nehemiah did that. And he trusted in the Lord that he never abandoned the work that was present in the moment.
Yeah. I would also add to that, the thought that came to my mind was also sharing that burden and that calling with someone else that can keep you accountable to that. I think is all, we talk about accountability is so important. And I think that would also be another good nugget that I would add is surround yourself with people that are going to build you up in those moments. They're going to help work alongside you to keep you focused on that task, to pray with you, because we're going to feel weary. We're going to feel burned out, but it's like you need those people to constantly pour into you in that regard.
Yes, that's good advice. Just to remember that Solomon talks about a three-corded strand. That's right, too.
Yeah, correct.
And I think that is true, but I think most of all, it is the Lord and keeping our focus and our eyes on Him. It's so important. And so at the risk of just preaching my sermon again, I think the response is we look up, we look back, we look around, and we look ahead.
Yeah.
Meaning we look up and pray.
Yeah.
That's the first thing we do. If you're listening to this and you're struggling in that, as you're saying, then look up. That's your first move.
Yeah.
Look up, pray, begin to pray. God hasn't forsaken you. He will hear your prayer. And I sought the Lord, and He heard and He answered.
Amen.
Right? That's why I trust Him. So, look up. And then also look back because, it's important that I'm certain Nehemiah often would look back at this calling, look back at his original experience there in Susa, the palace, and look back at how God had provided so miraculously.
Yeah.
Everything from permission from the king to leave, to permission for materials, to protection, all those things that I'm sure that as he looked back and as we look back on what God has done in our lives, and you don't have to be old to do that.
Yeah.
You can do that as a teenager.
Absolutely.
You know where God has moved in your life and in your heart, and you look back and you draw from that. And then I think it's important also to look around to see what God is doing, where God's at work, and what the enemy's doing.
Absolutely.
We need to be aware. I think that's something else here that's important. They were aware of the enemy. So they didn't put down the trowel, but they picked up a sword.
Yes.
Because they were aware of the enemy. They didn't stop, but there was an awareness there. And then finally, look ahead. I think you always have to keep your mind on the goal, keep your eye on the goal. But as to your other question, too, about God not showing you all the details, I'm pretty sure if He showed me at 19, when I first became interested in being a pastor or got called to be a pastor, I'm pretty sure, or 15 when God called me into this thing.
Wow.
If He would have told me I was going to pastor a church in a skating rink, a bar, and a high school auditorium, I'm pretty sure I would have not thought that was for God.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You've been like, oh, are you sure? Are you sure you're calling me to that?
Well, this boy was raised in a very traditional Baptist church, right?
Yeah.
So, no.
Yeah. Just to kind of end this conversation, you guys have any last minute thoughts for our listener for this sermon series as we're coming to a close? Anything you want to add to our discussion today?
I'll go back to week 1 and understanding of this, and the last minute thought, is just to reiterate taking all 4 parts of this series and bringing them down to one, because people left with the question, what is my calling? Am I in my calling? Am I fulfilling my calling? I think that's the big question. Look at Nehemiah when it started with a burden, and then from there, prayer. And that would just be my challenge to people, is to just spend time in prayer. As you say, read through this verse by verse, slowly. And especially, in the beginning, when we see that he mourned, he wept, and he prayed for many days. It takes time.
Yeah.
And while the calling, is the big thing that we're focusing, it's in those moments of prayer that God's really working in your heart.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think I would probably sum up with some encouraging thoughts. One is, if you're a leader, I think you need to study this book very carefully. I think you need to watch Nehemiah, get some other insights on Nehemiah as a leader. I think leaders need to learn from Nehemiah. If you're, and as Robert has said several times in this podcast, that I don't mean just a church leader.
Yeah.
Maybe none any more important than leading in your home.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you've got dad, you are the leader of your home. Mom, you are the leader of your children, your family and your home. And so I think as leaders, we need to read Nehemiah. Secondly, I would say read, and we've said this a couple times, read the whole book.
Yeah.
There's so much more there that we didn't have time to cover. And I would say read the book and just keep building.
Yeah.
Just keep building, because nobody complains, nobody criticizes until you start building.
Yeah.
Nobody complained about the broken wall.
Nope.
They just complained when they
Because it
started
sat
building
there for
it
a
back.
while. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It sat there and nobody complained. Nobody opposed anything until you start to build. And when you start to build your life after Jesus, building it into the image of Jesus, when you start to build your family, when you start to shape your family as followers of Christ, that's when opposition comes. Just to quote the great theologian Tom Petty, don't back down.
That's right.
Don't back down. Too bad we don't have that song to start playing right now. Well, Eddie and Robert, thank you again for joining me this morning as we wrap up our call to this sermon series. Man, it was a good one. For the listener, thanks for tuning in today. We're praying for you. Easter is coming up in 2 weeks. If you don't have a home church, we would love to have you here at the Orchard Easter Sunday. All of our locations have added extra service times, so be sure to check out our website, and find a time you can come and join us. But have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow on this journey of faith and embrace community together. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we want to hear from you. Be sure to reach out to us through our social media or visit our website to stay connected. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Until next time, we hope that this episode inspired you and will keep Sunday's message at the front of your mind. See you next week.